Hey there, EB here. Weekly update. End of the summer, heading into the fall, football season, school beginning. Exciting times. Always when there's a change of season, it's a little bit melancholy, but a little bit exciting. Lots happening again this week. Tonight, we finally are going to hear from Kamala Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz. It's going to be on CNN. Dana Bash is going to do the interview. I think it was recorded today during their 2-day bus tour in Savannah. It's about time that Kamala answer some questions. Now, obviously, these are prepackaged questions, and I would have preferred that she would have done a live press conference and do it alone. She has certainly enjoyed a rise in the polls, and it's been about 36 days, and all she has done is um, speaking in front of a teleprompter, doing a very good job, but not fielding the hard questions because she has a lot to answer for in terms of changing her positions from when she ran for president in 2019 to some of her positions today. She's now not against fracking, a little bit more hawkish on her Middle East policy, a little stronger on immigration than she was in 2019. Um, she has some explaining to do, or splaining to do, as we say down south, about price controls that she wants for certain products. That's not something that a free market believes in. But I think that she probably will do well. They'll probably have some editorial control over some of the answers that she has given. And we'll see whether they let some things out if she misspeaks. So it's a big night. She certainly had a jump in the polls. Polls show her 2 points up in all the battleground states except Georgia. I don't believe that's an accurate poll. I always think that Donald Trump underpolls in these presidential elections, that many people are, whether they're embarrassed or they're not willing to say they support him. I think he polls worse than his actual vote. So I think if the Democrats and Harris is going to feel emboldened, that she's going to have a 4-point to a 5-point lead going into the election. So let's see how she fares tonight. It'll be interesting. Sure, Trump is going to be on True Social in real time saying some things about her. We've certainly had some Trump news in this past week. First, we have him getting the endorsement of Robert F. Kennedy, which is a seismic event. I say seismic because the Kennedy family has been a Democratic family since Joe Kennedy, the grandfather of John F. Kennedy, and the father of Robert F. Kennedy, and Jack Kennedy, the president. They've been a Democratic family their entire lives. And Robert F. Kennedy, who doesn't have any of the support or endorsement from any family members except his wife, Cheryl Hines, from Curb Your Enthusiasm, he gave up his independent run for the White House and threw his support to Donald Trump. He was polling anywhere from 2 to 4%. After Harris got in the race and Biden stepped down, his numbers started decreasing. But I think it's a big endorsement because I think it could make the difference in some of these battleground states where he was getting some of the independent vote regarding his positions on vaccinations, specifically COVID, and some other kind of conspiracy theories that he has that resonated with a small portion of the voting population. So there has been some talk that J.D. Vance, who's done such uh, a bad job, I think, as a vice presidential candidate, he's actually the most unpopular VP candidate of all time in how he's polling. There's been some talk that possibly Trump would dump him from the ticket and name Robert F. Kennedy as his running mate. I don't think that's going to happen, but J.D. Vance certainly, and we're going to talk about what happened in Arlington yesterday, but you can't tell a woman to go to hell. And that's what he said yesterday to Kamala Harris. He basically, and in fact, said that she should go to hell for criticizing Donald Trump for going into Section 60 in Arlington Cemetery and filming him laying a wreath on one of the tombstones, which is forbidden. That section you can't ever take any photography or film, and he was told not to, and he did it anyway. And he was criticized, by the way, for that, not only by the Democrats, not only by Vice President Harris and President Biden, but actually the head of the Army and the head of the Arlington Cemetery laid justifiable criticism. There was also a Gold Star family whose son had committed suicide in 2020, whose headstone was shown. Trump was not there to lay a wreath on his headstone, but in the photographs that were campaign propaganda, this young man's photograph of his tombstone was shown, and the family was very upset. Trump went there for good reason. Um, he went there to support the anniversary of the death of the 13 brave soldiers that were killed with the evacuation from Afghanistan during President Biden's term. And I have no problem with former President Trump going there to honor the dead, but certainly it is in very, very poor taste to have used it as a campaign prop to get some filming and some still photos of that. That's one of the hallowed grounds that we have. In addition to Normandy, Arlington Cemetery is a place where we pay respects for people that gave their life for our country. So that's an interesting development. It's just another slap in the face to the military that Trump has done, that began with, him draft dodging with bone spurs, and then certainly saying that John McCain isn't a hero because he got shot down, uh, to the point where he said in front of General Kelly, whose son died, by the way, in Iraq, that he thinks that all the people who were in Normandy are stupid and suckers for giving their life. And then last week we talked about that. He talked about the Medal of Freedom is a better medal to get than the highest honor, which is the Congressional Medal of Honor, given to those in the military that are injured. He said, "I'd rather get the Medal of Freedom because you're not killed or you're not maimed. You're prettier looking." So it's just a continuation of him slamming the military. Trump was also reindicted this week on a supersedious indictment. Supersedious means it supplants the previous indictment. And this was in the Judge Chunkin case in D.C. over the January 6th rioting. They reindicted him, and the indictment that was approved by a grand jury um, now sets forth the acts which he had done, allegedly done, that are personal in nature, that don't get immunity, and were not official acts that come within the Supreme Court decision that was laid down in June. So we shall see that. Um, we still have the appeal that's going to take place for Judge Cannon in Fort Pierce, Florida, for dismissing the uh, documents case, claiming that Jack Smith was an inappropriately appointed special counsel. I think she's going to be reversed on that. But the Fani Willis case in Georgia, I tend to agree with Trump. I think that she has overstepped her bounds. I think when she got in front of Ebenezer Church and she called Trump racist, um, is over the top. It's prejudicial to former President Trump. She overstepped her bounds. She possibly prejudiced the jury pool, in addition to the affair and maybe some of the untruthful testimony that came out in the hearing with the former uh, prosecutor that she appointed, who was private attorney. So I guess we're going to see an immunity hearing in front of Judge Chunkin sometime over the next 3 or 4 months, which should indicate those acts which Trump did individually. Not sure it's going to take place before the election. We're starting to see the reappearance of QAnon. Um, Former President Trump retweeted a QAnon phrase that said, um, can't stop what's coming. That's the new QAnon phrase, meaning you can't stop what will happen if President Trump doesn't win the upcoming election. Um, Also, he retweeted something that was very indelicate uh, of Vice President Harris in an orange jumpsuit as a convicted felon. She certainly, the argument can't be made that she's done anything illegal. I get it that you're talking about Hunter Biden. I get it that you're talking about Joe Biden and the Biden crime family and Hillary Clinton. But there's never been an allegation that Vice President Harris has done anything that would lead her to be the subject of any criminal indictment. Um, we also have a lot going on in Israel. Israel bombed Hezbollah uh, in advance as a preemptive strike. They got some intelligence that Hezbollah was going to start bombing them in connection with the death of the Hamas leader that took place on Iranian soil last month. And they unloaded on Hezbollah in Lebanon, which now means you have military engagement in the south in Gaza. You now have military engagement in the north with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And then the first time this week, they killed 9 Hamas uh, soldiers in the West Bank. Remember, Israel is in the middle between the Gaza Strip, which is on the water, and then the West Bank, which is on the other side of Israel. And this is the first time where the PLO, where Mahmoud Abbas is the president of the PLO, where Israel went into the West Bank. So it's extremely, extremely toxic right now and dangerous, and it's a powder keg. We also had some things written this week about Alex Murdaugh and his prison life. Supposedly, it was told by Amy Zamarchek, who is the attorney for cousin Eddie. Not sure how much it's true because she actually hasn't seen him or been in his prison, but she said that Alex is running a gambling operation, that he's having a grand old time in prison, doing a lot of underground stuff. I'm not sure how much I believe of that. He's in a maximum security prison. Yes, there's things that do happen um, where the correctional officers may turn a blind eye to it, where there's some contraband that comes in, whether it's food or cigarettes or things like that. But I'm not sure he's running a full-fledged gambling operation. They say he's out in general population and he's helping out the inmates. I had not heard that he's in general population. In fact, I heard that he is in a secured area of only 100 prisoners that are not released to Gen Pop, that he spends most of his time during the day in his cell. So we shall see whether that is something that is true or not. Interestingly, though, we've had a couple jurors speak this week. We had the egg lady juror who just wrote a book. She's the juror who was discharged by Judge Newman before the verdict was rendered, and Juror Z, who also talked publicly. Both of them appeared on Fox News in front of Martha McCallum, and both said that former clerk of court for Colleton County, Becky Hill, made inappropriate inquiries of them, discussed the merits of the case, and they discussed the merits of case with her. So let me address the egg lady first. She admitted that on more than one occasion that she spoke to Becky Hill about her feelings of Alex Murdaugh's possible guilt, and that she questioned his guilt. Um, that alone is an admission by her that she disregarded the instructions by Judge Newman, and it was absolute grounds for him to remove her. She should not have remained on the jury, if it can be believed that she had those discussions with Becky Hill. More troubled by Juror Z, because Juror Z was one of the jurors who rendered a verdict. She said now that she was pressured not only by Becky Hill to do a guilty verdict, but by the other jurors. I think that is not credible. I say that for two reasons. One, she was polled after the jury verdict of guilty was read. That's where each individual juror raises their hand and swears under oath that the verdict was the product of their own free will, of their own conscience, without duress or coercion. So I'm very leery of jurors a year and a half after a verdict has been rendered, like it has been in this case, to now be subject to all direct, indirect pressure, listening to legal scholars on TV talking about the case. And it's natural that you would question, was my decision right or wrong? So I don't think we should have a system um, unless it can be proven that somebody violated their oath, that you go back and you revisit a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict if the jury is polled. And she now is vacillating and saying that she was pressured by Becky Hill. I represented 6 of the jurors who testified that they didn't hear Becky Hill at all say anything inappropriate other than ministerial things dealing with food and when the trial for that day would end, transportation to and from court. Um, and they all testified, at least 11 of them did, that nothing influenced their verdict other than the evidence of the 400 pieces of evidence that was received by the court and the testimony of over 70 witnesses. So they followed the instructions of Judge Newman. And Justice Toll, the former Chief Justice, made a decision that 11 people are more credible than Juror Z, and therefore she felt that there was not anything inappropriate that Becky Hill had done. But she also applied the South Carolina standard, which said the defense would have to prove that the jury verdicts was the product of interference by Becky Hill, which she said they did not. The appellate courts are going to have to determine whether she applied the correct standard, whether it should have only been the federal standard under the Remmer decision, and that is just proving that Becky Hill said something beyond her ministerial tasks. I don't think our Supreme Court is going to reverse the former Chief Justice, Jean Toll, because it's going to be one of her last acts before she fully retires as a senior judge. I think if Alex Murdaugh is going to get any redress, it's going to come in a federal court. So that is what happened this week. I had several appearances this week on TV, on court TV, where I discussed this very topic. The announcement yesterday by the Kelsey Brothers of their new podcast deal, $100 million for their New Heights podcast, between the brothers, is amazing. It shows the power of podcasting, and good for them. I find them to be very interesting. Of course, one played for the Eagles, and the other, Travis Kelsey, is dating Taylor Swift and is a Super Bowl champion for the Kansas City Chiefs. He makes, I think, $34 million on a 2-year contract. That's $17 million a season. If he's getting half of that $100 million, that's $50 million. Seems it's more lucrative to get behind a microphone than get in front of a defensive line in the National Football League. The other thing that happened this week is Susan Smith. That's a name, if you are upper in age like I am, in my 60s. In the early 90s, she drowned her 2 kids in the upstate in Union, South Carolina, by pushing their car while they were in the car, 2 beautiful children, into a lake. Um, and then for a week, she blamed it on an African American man, an alleged African American man that carjacked her and um, drove the car in the lake. It turns out that she did it. Um, she now is up for parole after doing almost 30 years. She asked this week that her ex-husband, the father of her children, consent for her to be let out. He is not going to consent. I wouldn't consent. She's had a lot of infractions in prison, I'm told. She also got married in prison. She's had a baby in prison. I'm just sorry if you drown and kill two of your lovely children. You've forfeited your right to live in a civilized society. Hey, Joe Kiblen, go Bills. Josh Allen, I think, is the second best, third best quarterback in the NFL. It's going to be interesting to see how the Bills do without Stephon Diggs, who was traded to the Houston Texans. He's responsible for a lot of catches and yards over the past 4 years, but he may have been a locker room problem. So we shall see how the Bills do. I think this is going to be the last year for their coach if he doesn't at least advance them deep into the playoffs. Patty, go Dogs. Going to talk about that in a minute between Clemson and Georgia, 12 o'clock on Saturday. I'll get into that. But let's talk about they got 6 bodies out of Gaza this week of hostages, unfortunately, that were killed. But they also rescued a Arab Israeli citizen. There's a significant population of Arabs in Israel who are loyal to Israel, and one was rescued. So I thought that was an amazingly brave, successful way of getting out one of the hostages. There was also a situation with American Airlines this week where one of the stewardesses had a Palestinian flag on her lapel and the black and white Kafka scarf on, which a lot of the passengers on the airplane were offended by. Again, we're a society of free speech. I'm all for it, but if you want to have that kind of hate speech, you better be prepared for the repercussions. Um, we have the debate coming up, which is going to be interesting between Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump. They're still laboring over the rules. Do we have a hot mic or not a hot mic? Surprisingly, uh, Kamala Harris wants a hot mic. She wants Trump to trip over himself and interrupt him so that she can turn to him as a prosecutor and say, "Excuse me, I'm still speaking," which is her famous line that she did during the question and answer of some of the Supreme Court selections when she was in the Senate, where the Senate gives advice and consent on Supreme Court justices. So I think that debate is going to be interesting. It's going to be well watched, and we shall see who does well during that. Subway is hurting. Subway franchise, where you get your sandwiches, their sales are down 20%, and they're forcing their franchisees with these high cost of meat and other products to offer a $6.99 foot long hoagie when they usually sell anywhere between $12.50 and $17. If you were a franchisee before 2020, you have the ability to not do that promotion. Um, there's actually a Subway franchise union who is advocating not for all these franchises not to do it. But if you like your Subway sandwiches, you have to order it through your app, and you could get a $6.99 12-inch hoagie, which should last you 2 days, and it's a pretty good deal. Um, let's talk about college football. Very exciting stuff coming up. Tonight we have Colorado versus North Dakota State. North Dakota State wins the national championship or plays in it every year. They're not in the Power Five divisions, but they are an excellent football team. Trey Lance came from there. Carson Wentz played in that division. Um, and they're playing Colorado, Deion Sanders. And Deion's had a rough offseason. A lot of personal problems with players, unlawful activity, a lot of kind of gangster activity. He has been abusive towards the press. There's rumors that he has not been recruiting. He gets most of his players through the portal. And Shador, his son, who's the quarterback, is extremely good. But it's highly possible tonight that they could lose to North Dakota State. For me, the game of the next month is Clemson Georgia on 12 o'clock on Saturday. I don't think Clemson's going to beat Georgia. I think they'll cover the spread of 13 points, but I do not believe they're going to beat Georgia. We're interested to see how Dabo does. He's been awful quiet. Miami's playing Florida, but I think it's going to be interesting to see Caleb Daber, I think his name, the new coach of Alabama, who took over from Nick Saban. He came from Washington, where they were undefeated going into the playoffs last year. They lost, but he's been a winner everywhere he's gone. He's coached at Austin Peay and a couple other places, and his record's 111 and 12 losses. So interesting that Alabama would hire a coach that has no connection either as a head coach or assistant coach with the SEC. But I think they're a juggernaut, and we shall see how they'll do on Friday. In the NFL, um, they announced today that Caleb Williams for the Bears, first pick in the draft, is going to start the season. Uh, Jalen Daniels, who played for LSU, was drafted by the Commanders. He's also going to start. The third quarterback, Drake Mayo, for the Patriots, is not going to start, and they're going to start Jacoby Brissett, who's a veteran of about 9 years, played for about 5 or 6 different teams. I think that's smart. The Patriots are probably going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And why put a young quarterback in there only to get beat up when you have a very soft offensive line? So the NFL season's coming up. Bo Nix, who played for 7 years last year for Oregon and was drafted by the Denver Broncos, beat out Jared Stidham, and he's going to start for Sean Payton out in the Denver Broncos. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, Russell Wilson beat out Justin Fields, which is a little bit surprising, and is going to be the starting quarterback. So that is sports. Also want to talk briefly about Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge this week hit his 50th home run, did it faster than any in 3 straight seasons, hit 50 or more home runs. Only Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire did that. The difference is there's never been an allegation that Aaron Judge is on steroids. He's hitting second in the league in batting average, had an amazing catch at the warning track, will definitely be the American League MVP. I think Juan Soto, they're going to have a difficult time. The Yankees re-signing him. I think he's going to either get 500 or 600 million as a 25-year-old player. Aaron Judge obviously is 32 years old. Shohei Ohtani just keeps doing it. Hit his 42nd home run last night. He's the fastest player to 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases in a season. There's no question he's going to win the National League MVP. H.R. McMaster, who used to be the national security advisor during the Trump administration, wrote a book and really gave some insight into the war room, the situation room, and different things that former President Trump said that turned a lot of heads in the military and different people who were in these rooms when he said, why can't we use nuclear weapons in bombing North Korea? They told him, well, there would be fallout that would hurt South Korea, and we have 70,000 troops there, and some other things that were said. So I think that's an interesting book to read. Steph Curry just signed a $62.5 million 1-year extension, taking his contract all the way through 2027. He's worth every penny. It's a lot of money, but he brings his game every night. Caitlin Clark set the rookie record for 3 points and assists in the WNBA. No question she should win Rookie of the Year in the WNBA. CeeDee Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys finally signed his contract, was a holdout. They paid him $135 million. They still haven't paid Dak Prescott yet. I think Dak Prescott's going to end up being the highest paid quarterback in the league. Dallas has the best 3-year record over the last 3 years in the regular season, 12-5 each year. Dak Prescott hasn't done it in the playoffs, but his statistics are bar none that good. The other big holdouts at this time, other than Dak Prescott, are Jamar Chase, who is the wide receiver from LSU for the Bengals, and he has not been paid, and he's supposed to be paid. Brandon Ayuk has 2 years left on his contract with the 49ers, and he has not uh, put on his uniform. He's holding out for a new contract. And Trent Williams, their great offensive lineman, who has 3 years left on his contract, is holding out. I have a real problem when you sign a contract and then you hold out when you're 2 or 3 years into your contract and the market changes and you realize that you're not getting paid commensurate with other players in your position. Don't sign a 5-year contract. Don't sign a 3-year contract if that's the case. Um, I'm really happy to announce my book is finished. Today, we finished all the copy editing of punctuation and grammar. We finished the photograph placement this week. It's going to be sent off to be bound. So I expect that the book is going to be released within the next 3 or 4 weeks. There'll be electronic copies as well on Amazon. Um, and there'll be hardback copies. The podcast is going well. I appreciate anybody listening to leave a 5-star review. It's the Good Skill Podcast, Betting on Yourself. Last week, we had former Governor Mark Sanford. Previous week, we had Bert Soren, who was is the president of Soren X Exercise Equipment, and our first guest was Rebecca Rausch. We have some interesting guests coming up. I'm going to be interviewing a doctor this week, a former NFL middle linebacker who now is a businessman. How do you transition from professional athletes to regular business life? I'm also interviewing a history professor who is researching a case where a man who was innocent of a crime was lynched and taken out of the Lexington County Prison and lynched by a public mob. So that is interesting. Looking at the questions of the week from our listeners, um, Casey Odell said, "What are my thoughts on the upcoming parole hearing on Susan Smith?" We talked about that, Casey. I don't think she should get it. I think it's a disgrace that she would ask her husband um, to let her get parole. Yes, people can be forgiven. I'm not sure she could be forgiven for that crime. Um, Patty asked, "Do I believe that someone who is guilty of a crime will usually confess their guilt to their attorney?" Sometimes, Patty. Sometimes it happens that that someone will confess their guilt, and you can't reveal it as the attorney. Um, I never ask that. When I sense a client starts to talk about it, I tell them not to talk about it because as a human, it would affect my ability to zealously protect their rights. I would still work for them very hard. I would make sure that the government proves their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But it's something that I really don't want to know. It's not my job to find out whether they're guilty or innocent or not guilty. My job is to give them the defense that they're entitled to. Dana asked, "Is it on the table for Murdaugh to pay back some of the millions he has that cost the taxpayers of South Carolina?" Restitution orders are always ordered, but they're very rarely complied with because somebody like Alex Murdaugh, who's going to be in prison for the rest of his life, whether it's for the murders or the financial crimes, is really not going to come on for any money. Finally, David asked, "Hey, EB, love the weekly news wrap-ups. Did you see um, Tom Girardi? He's a lawyer in California, was guilty of embezzling $15 million. Yes, I did. He's a disgrace to the profession, similar to Alex Murdaugh. Um, he was married to, I think, one of the housewives of Beverly Hills and a very flamboyant lifestyle. And it turns out that he was dipping into his escrow account and stealing money from clients, which is an absolute disgrace. Lawyers have a fiduciary obligation, and the clients place trust and confidence in them. So, yeah, I think that he should be sentenced to a long term, even though he's an elderly man. Um, Casey, thanks for uh, jumping in today. You said jurors being tracked down by Dick and Jim would have an effect. I absolutely do agree that, you hear words spoken to you by lawyers and, they tell you why something happened and it starts to make you question yourself. Um, Patty, I think the Dogs are going to win, even though I'm a Clemson fan, because my daughter went to Clemson University. Go Gamecocks. I think the Gamecocks will do well this weekend. Not sure how well they're going to do in the SEC. Thank you so much, Casey, for listening to the Mark Sanford interview. I thought it was interesting as well. So, everybody, have a great weekend. Watch a lot of football. Get ready for the fall and go Cox and go Tigers. Thank you very much.